is as antiseptic as the pictures. Bombings are airstrikes. A future bomb site is a target of opportunity. Unarmed areas are soft targets. Civilians are collateral damage. Destruction is always surgical.
So you're going to have to go back and make another pass with some other asset to determine whether you've actually hit the target and what the impact is.
Well, you're throwing a lot of jargon in.
I'm going to be
a lot of
careful of
jargon.
that.
We got assets and BDAs going.
But of course, the clean war can't escape certain contradictions, such as the fact that there is no such thing as a clean war.
On the second day, the plan calls for launching another 300 to 400 cruise missiles. There will not be a safe place in Baghdad, said one Pentagon official who has been briefed on the plan.
David, who is left in the capital of Iraq now?
Very few people have been able to get out. There have been very long queues at petrol stations.
It's almost a contradiction in terms of what we're being briefed, that it is going to be, we've been told for so many weeks and months, this massive aerial bombardment, but on the other hand, they also want to go soft for fear of doing too much damage to civilians and other kinds of infrastructure.
At this moment, the people there, well, the people there are never under attack, but the military forces there are not under attack either.
In the rare instance where civilians are acknowledged, the falling bombs are described as a minor annoyance.
The people of Baghdad are spending what must be a difficult and unsettling night, perhaps their last night before war begins. This is a live picture of Baghdad tonight, eerily quiet this evening.
One colonel with the 3rd Infantry sending a message to the Iraqi civilians. The message is this: stay home.
Well, it started out as a relatively quiet night last night in Baghdad, but this morning, Sunday morning, Iraqis are awakening to thunderous explosions.
Most rare is the humanizing of those on the ground. The image of civilians with families and fears is so out of place in the clean war as to seem surreal.
And I've never known this city so quiet. It's like everybody here is holding their breath, looking upwards, looking southwards, expecting the attack to come any minute now. There are many civilian, large civilian bomb shelters, but many people don't want to go in those. They all remember the casualties from the last Gulf War. They'd rather make it on their own, go in their own back gardens with their own children, and fend for themselves.
But by and large, the clean war wiped the humanity of civilians from the screen.
Baghdad is once again rocking under an aerial bombardment, which the Pentagon calls shock and awe. More explosions from what appears.
The Pentagon publicly stated in 2003 that it does not do body counts. This leaves the task of counting to others. In November of 2004, the high-profile British medical journal The Lancet published a study conducted out of Johns Hopkins University. A group of epidemiologists used conventional sampling methods to estimate the civilian death toll. Making conservative assumptions, they wrote, we think that about 100,000 excess deaths or more have happened since the 2003 invasion of Iraq.
The U.S. loses more than 140 soldiers. At least 13 journalists die, including NBC's David Bloom. On the Iraqi side, the toll is in the thousands, but the exact number may never be known.
Though slightly more visible, images of U.S. dead are also scrubbed by the clean war. In 1991, President George H.W. Bush ordered a ban on press access to all returning U.S. caskets. A decade later, President George W. Bush strictly enforced the ban. Some of the few glimpses of the cost of war to U.S. families could only be seen in photos leaked to the Seattle Times. The U.S. military budget in 2005 approached the budgets of all other nations on Earth combined. In contrast, the Iraqi military budget was 1/400th of this size. What we call war has thus changed dramatically from the war of our grandparents, and it comes with a new language. The guiding metaphor by which we talk about this new clean-looking war is, not surprisingly, a cleanup job.
Would you categorize this as mop-up operations, or could there be some significant fighting as they go through these towns?
And the military says it's still mopping up small pockets of resistance in the town.
It's only a matter of time before the U.S. and coalition forces get the job done in Iraq.
We're at high altitude.
The pilot, who goes by the call sign Mr. Clean, simply flies the B-1 to an optimum release point for the JDAMs to begin their lethal glide.
And the clean war must contend with plenty of dirt.
Planning to detonate a dirty bomb in the U.S.
It's the big fear they might fight dirty.
But they're raiding the home of the notorious woman known as Dr. Germ.
Secretary of State Colin Powell called the fugitive dictator, and I quote, a piece of trash waiting to be collected by U.S. forces hunting him.
Another powerful metaphor that accompanies the clean war is that of the hunt.
Even to the degree of chasing one ghostly figure running down the road.
He went down to the ground. Yeah, he just dove on the ground. He's moving again.
One Taliban escaped by heading to a mosque.
We can get a good sense of the hunting metaphor at work by looking at the way Fox News treated some footage released by the Pentagon during the Afghan invasion of 2001. The footage came from an AC-130 gunship, nicknamed Azrael for the angel of death in the Quran.
The hunt intensifies.
Even though the glowing figures on the ground were human beings, the effect of the narrative is akin to, say, someone zapping insects.
The gunship finishes up the job.
Ready. Back on the other guys. Oh, he got the other guy.
One last look, and back to base.
Like the cleanup job, the hunting metaphor casts the business of killing humans into something more palatable. Abstracting the war into a hunt for a few game animals gives us a very selective view of what's at stake. But it does make war TV friendly.
Morning, stepping up the hunt for Saddam Hussein.
I don't know how close we are to getting Saddam Hussein. You know, it's closer than we were yesterday, I guess. All I know is we're on the hunt.
That U.S. forces hunting for Saddam Hussein have new leads and
will be hunted down and treated with accordingly.
We're still hoping to hunt them down as you are looking at tanks rolling their way through Baghdad.
The clean war so dominates the screen that we actually have to be reminded that when bombs fall, people die. After all, there's a small chance that we may be exposed to images of human suffering that slip through the cracks. If this were to happen, and we didn't have warnings like this one from Dan Rather, we might not know what to think.
That the leadership of the United States feels very important for people to understand, and that is, quote, Americans ought to be prepared for loss of life, which is to say, must be prepared for loss of life, loss of the lives of our own fighting men and women, as well as those of the British and Australians who are gathering us, and the loss of life inside Iraq. Does it need to be said?
Strangely, it does.
You're looking at some of the B-1 bombers that haven't been deployed from Ellsworth Air Force Base yet, but this morning around 4 a.m. local time, the first three took off, and when you're 300 feet away from them when they do it, you hear it in your shoes and feel it in your gut.
In the time leading up to the 2003 invasion of Iraq, MSNBC's John Elliott had a job to do. His task was to lead us around a virtual showroom of military hardware. Mr. Elliott's enthusiasm for his job was unmistakable. He was a kid in a candy store.
Anyway, affect the way the plane flies. Just imagine 7 of these used just for the... I want to walk you here from the ground first. This is the Boxer. This is an amphibious assault ship. You see the crew members lining up there. These are the Sea Knights here. These are the transport helicopters.
The message was clear enough. The proper attitude to take toward these machines of destruction was not somberness, but delight.
And another base here in San Diego, Miramar, you hear those things buzzing overhead quite a bit. Big monsters there. Also have some aerial views. As I mentioned, this deployment...
Elliott, of course, wasn't the only one. Together, the networks dispatched a choir of reporters to sing the praises of the high-tech war machine.
The U.S. appears to have assembled now an awesome display of missiles within striking range. Fox News Pentagon correspondent Brett Baer has that story.
4th Infantry today is the world's deadliest, most technologically advanced armored division. And it's arriving in Kuwait as part of Task Force Iron Horse, a mighty second wave of American power about to break on Iraq.
These 27-ton machines, that's roughly the weight of 4 elephants, can pound over flat terrain at nearly 50 miles an hour, delivering infantry close to their objectives while shielding them from hostile fire. Plus, they can swim.
They're bringing in, I got to tell you, my favorite aircraft, the A-10 Warthog. I love the Warthogs. They're in.
Very interesting thing I might want to point here out on the